Welcome into the Late Night Gamecock Show. I hope most of you watching realize that it was just a typo. We were not on the air at 8 a.m. this morning. We're not across the world. We're not overseas. We're not, no. 8 a.m. No, this is the late night show, Alex.
Yeah, late night at 8 a.m. That would have been interesting.
But we got a lot to talk about on the show, and I'm excited to talk about Gamecocks being voted 13th in the country, according to the coaches in the preseason poll. There's been a lot of quotes that Alex and Hale and John and folks on the Big Spur have gotten a hold of from certain coaches and certain players. So we want to highlight some of the things that we're hearing, from the mouth of babes, right? From the horse's mouth. After that, we'll talk some fall fallout, Alex. Say that 5 times fast. Fall fallout. We're going to see, what we're hearing after the first couple of days of practice. And remember, take everything you hear from us, everything you hear from any source with a gigantic grain of salt until they put pads on.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now they're in shoulder pads and helmets, and either today or tomorrow they should be getting into full pads. I know they obviously want to get a few days before they get to that first scrimmage, have a few full days and a few days in full pads, but that's when you can pick up some stuff from these early practices, but really once you hit that first scrimmage and on from there, that's really when you start to pick up some of the standouts and things on both sides of the ball. Early, I guess this year is going to be all three phases that are really tracking.
Yeah, but there was a lot of stuff that happened in last spring over the summer, stuff with Coach Luke Day that we have heard little nuggets about.
Yeah.
We're going to finish up our preseason South Carolina, SEC, and Clemson schedule preview. So we're going to talk about Texas A&M and Clemson tonight. And then, Alex, I've seen so much over the past couple of weeks, all these media days and schedule complaints. And, it's not fair. We have to play this many teams. They don't have to play this many teams. Our schedule's harder than you think it is. Their schedule's easier than you think it is. We're going to talk about that as well. But, Alex, the last thing I had before we hit this introduction video, why did you have to wait outside on the first day of fall camp, man? They didn't know you were there? Did they see you?
You'd think as soon as I pulled up, they just opened the doors. But now they
with a red carpet.
You're right. Yeah. That'd be nice. No, but didn't get to wait too long those first 2 days to get in, and we'll actually get to see practice again on Friday. And I think we get maybe 3 or 4 periods this time. So looking forward to seeing what we see in the day before the scrimmage.
Yeah, man, I was shocked at 9:35. You said, or 9:05, you were still outside. I was like, come on. When you go to fall camp, Alex, they see you all summer sweating in the heat. They come and dap you up. They know you're out there. They can let you in a little early sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's because I was wearing a hat, couldn't see my red hair or something like that. I don't know.
Well, last thing, I've seen a couple reports of this, and maybe you have your finger on it. I just saw Queen of the Cocks put it here in the chat. Is this Garrett Nussmeier injury a real thing? Is it a fake thing? I've heard that it's not real. I've heard he did get helped off the field. I don't know.
It seems like it's been everywhere today, but I don't think doesn't seem based on reading on Twitter and things like that. It doesn't seem like it's anything serious.
Well, it would be typical Clemson luck if he is not able to play week 1. Just typical Clemson luck. But we're not here to talk about Clemson right now. We have a lot of other things to talk about. Alex, let's go ahead and roll that show intro. And we have a special surprise about halfway through our episode tonight.
Gonna turn on the late night show, hear what's going down in Cool Town. I said I'm turning on late night show. Yeah, my Cox will let me down.
That is the best blues going on anywhere in the world right now. at 8:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. By the way, today is August 6th. Happy August 6th. Happy August, Alex.
It's football month.
it feels like it.
Yeah, how about this weather? First of all, like obviously in Columbia it's been rainy, but the temperature wise, it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah, and you know what? Like I'm fine with the rain. I know as soon as the rain came, there was some old couple or neighbors, sitting at each other's house having coffee, tea. Man, we really needed this rain, and we did. We did need the rain. Then we got 2.5 inches in Florence one night. But Alex, really quick, I don't know how much there is to this, how much we really want to talk about it. Gamecocks are ranked 13th in the coaches preseason poll. You look at the top five. The top five is Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, Georgia. As we mentioned, the Gamecocks are 13th. If you look at the three teams ahead of them, Miami, Arizona State, and Illinois, Gamecock fans remember Illinois not so fondly. And then 14th through 16th is Michigan, Ole Miss, and SMU. Gamecocks are ranked 5th in the SEC. As far as opponents they have on their schedule that are ranked ahead of them in this particular poll, Clemson came in at number 6, Alabama 8, LSU 9. And let's see. I just had a weird thing pop up. Sorry. My internet session went bad on my other Gmail. I have a couple of them, but this is the work one. So, Alex, looking at that, so you have 6, 8, 9. The Gamecocks play in this this preseason poll. Then you have 15 and 21, Ole Miss and Texas A&M, but those are road games. So it's looking like, if you trust the coaches, 3 of the guaranteed losses and 2 swing games, somewhere in the 9-3 to 7-5 range. Do you think that? Do you think Gamecock fans should accept that this year? That they could take 9-3 or 7-5? They don't know, but they're going to get one of those two. Should the Gamecock fans take that deal?
It'd be a solid season, but I think even when you hear Shane Beamer and the players talk, like it kind of feels like the motto for them this year is to take it farther. And I think they know how close they were last year and how close they were to getting into that playoff. So I think that'd be another 9-win season would be great for South Carolina and be another thing they can use to recruit. But I think you would like to see if they could take that next step because. You got Lenora Sellers, who's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and if he has a great season, could be if Lenora Sellers is going to be a first round draft pick. I think you feel pretty good about what South Carolina was able to do this season. But it's a really interesting topic just from a ranking standpoint too. Obviously, you mentioned 13 in the coaches poll, but I'm really interested to see from an AP poll standpoint, which will come out on Monday, where they're going to be. Like I could see them being as high as 13th, but I could also see maybe in that 15 to 18 range, just because I think, a lot of people are going to probably look at, look what South Carolina lost from the NFL draft standpoint, especially defensively. And so I'm interested to see just how that kind of shakes out among the voters.
Yeah. If I'm a Gamecock fan, if I were a Gamecock fan, I would not take that deal. I don't think you settle for 9-3 for all the reasons that you mentioned. This is a, once in a lifetime type quarterback situation, potentially. Yep. Lightning doesn't strike 2-3 times unless you're a blue blood. It seems like, so yeah, I don't think I'd take that deal. Alex, just quickly, I want to move into some quotes from coaches and players. We're probably going to spend a decent amount of time. Actually, I lied. We're going to spend some time here. Shane Beamer talked about Josiah Thompson. I think it was well documented that last year he was playing in the 270s, 280s. I heard as low as 260s about halfway through the season when you started losing some of that weight you put on. But Shane Beamer complimented him, said he's over 300 pounds now, or in the 300-pound range, I think. But that's hard to do because if you've seen Josiah Thompson in person, there's not a lot of places to put fat.
Yeah, and I think, I remember talking to him. I can't remember. I think it was at like the Gamecock Gala thing last year, which is right in the spring or so. And he was kind of talking about wanting to put on weight to get ready for the season. I think I remember him saying he's eating like 6 meals a day to get to that 300-pound mark. And getting to that mark, I think is really huge just because of you really need to be there on the offensive line in the SEC, just with everybody that you're going to be going up against. And I think you saw, last year he held his own for the most part. And obviously, as a freshman in the SEC, you're going to have, some of those rough, times. But I thought for the most part he held his own. And getting to that 300-pound range is really going to help him too. And he's one that you really want to kind of keep an eye on early on in the season, just kind of see, what kind of steps he's taking, just because there's a lot of talent there. And you can see him potentially, if things keep progressing like he did as a freshman, you can see him being, in that, NFL draft discussion as well in a few years.
Yeah, I think so too. And with Josiah, the big thing to remember is I'm not saying the dude came to college with a six-pack, but he wasn't far off. So, I'm just saying when you're adding 20 pounds, I think that's why Shane highlighted it's weight, but it's a lot of strength. And he really needed to get stronger. They talked, the coaches and the players talked a lot about, Luke Day, what they've been doing from a competition standpoint, getting better standpoint. A lot of the transfers have said, hey, I've never seen anything like this. This is really great. So thoughts on, Luke Day, like Shane said in his presser the other day, like some people love him one year, hate him the next year. It's just however the season goes. But from all accounts, Luke Day has done a great job with these guys.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring that up, just because I think here, especially recently, you're hearing some of these guys who, we started talking to players in press conference settings yesterday and even in media day last week. But, just kind of bring up, I did some on Sean Murphy earlier today. And, he, something that he kind of said just really stuck out to me. A guy that's been in a strength conditioning program at Alabama and Florida State last year. But I'll just kind of read his quote real quick. He's asked about it, and he called it a one-of-one strength and conditioning program. And he said, "I've never done anything like what we do here, but I love it. It's hard, it's challenging. We compete at the same time while getting better and stronger. I feel like, we're building armor with our bodies so we can last long for the season." And he went on to kind of mention what they kind of do in the weight room has really helped them from a movement standpoint, and taking on blocks and all that. And I think it's really, kind of unique what they do just from some of that, the weight stuff. But, you kind of seen, from these, transformation pictures that have been posted here in this past few weeks, in these past 2 years, especially, it's been pretty incredible to see what they do. And it seems like every year under Shane Beamer so far and under Luke Day, it seems like more and more they continue to look like one of those an SEC team. And this year is no different. They look, all of them pretty much are definitely look the part.
Yeah, it's you want to be one of those teams and you get off the bus, other teams take notice. And, when you're at these summer camps, you can't help but be around some of these guys. And, they are every bit of SEC Division I level athletes. It's pretty incredible. Travian Robertson, man, I've known Travian for a decade plus now. He's a man of few words. I haven't seen much that Travian said, unless I missed it. The only thing I've really seen is Brownlow Dindy said that Travian has helped him get his confidence back up where he can be a dominant player in the SEC. Have you picked up anything from Travian? I didn't even get to talk to him at summer camp.
Yeah, he's talked both at Braves with Beamer and then at Media Day last weekend. I think, just kind of listening to him talk, one thing you do hear, one thing that I think is interesting, just talking about, Christian Ingram and what they see from him already, a guy that's in that 310-pound range already and 6'6", guy, we were talking about this, I think I was talking about this earlier, he's one that from a defensive tackle room, anything they can get from a Christian Ingram is a huge plus as a true freshman, just because it's so tough to get to that, to be able to do that as a true freshman. But he's got the size already, and he's one that you maybe wish was in for a spring practice just because, he'd be, maybe one step ahead. But guy that's really intriguing, and something I'm kind of interested really through that whole D tackle room, but especially him, to hear what they can get out of him through preseason camp and these scrimmages.
Yeah, and you had Sterling Lucas give some quick hitters to you guys, and conversations throughout Beamer's birdies with Beamer as well. But y'all see these guys. Dylan Stewart just handling the hype. He's the same kid. He's here to work. He's here to get better. He's really kept his head down. Brian Thomas Jr., we've talked a lot about him over the past couple of weeks. We think he's a guy that can make some noise. And the big thing for him is just his mental game, according to Sterling Lucas, getting that to play with his physical traits. But he's a good pass rusher and could have a breakout year. Jatius, how do I pronounce this?
JT Gear. Just go JT Gear.
Okay, JT Gear. He has opportunity to be pretty good. He has high effort, high activity. Dez, it seemed like this was an interesting quote to me, Alex. We talked about Dez at defensive end. Just the fact to have to kind of get stronger and, be able to be in a system. And I think people forget that so often.
Well, that's, when you start talking about Sterling Lucas, that was kind of the quote I was going to bring up on him, or start talking about Desmond Uizulu. Like, Sterling Lucas said, he said, quote, just how much more explosive he's gotten in the weight room. And he even said, my challenge to him is it's time. It's your third year in the program. So I think that's kind of what everybody's kind of thinking is that being that he's in his third year, everybody wants to see that jump, and he's going to have his opportunities. Somebody's got to back up Dylan Stewart, but also somebody's got to star on that other edge, and he's going to have every opportunity in preseason camp. And I think at the very least, he can be a guy that's going to provide them solid snaps this year.
I thought it was interesting the quote he had about Anthony Addison and no longer being a freshman. And I thought that was pretty high praise because check my math, Anthony Addison just committed in last year's class, correct?
Yeah, and bringing up Anthony Addison, he's the one that I know we're going to get into this in just a minute, but every year at media day, I kind of talk to the upperclassmen, even this year, the freshmen, to see what freshmen stuck out through preseason or through spring practice and into off-season workouts. And Anthony Addison was a name that came up a couple of times, and not too surprising based on what we heard, even publicly from what Shane Beamer said, at the spring. I think it was a spring game, but about how some of the problems Anthony Addison was causing. And just being just how disruptive he was, so that's not too surprising. And he's one too, kind of going with Dez. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he's getting them solid reps this year.
Jaquavius Dye got a shout out. Kobe got a big shout out. The freshman defensive edge, linebacker, whatever you want to call him. I think he's probably going to play. He's going to play defensive end though, right?
Yeah.
You think? Yeah. He gained 25 pounds in 2 months. Good job, young man. And the only other two folks that Sterling Lucas talked about was George Wilson and Damon Clowney. And really, those guys have been around the block. They played power football before. It's just going to be where can they contribute? How can they get the playbook down, the techniques down that they're going to deploy here? Torian Gray is always interesting to me, Alex. But I thought it was interesting we talked about with Jeff Collins and just going back to his days at Florida with Jeff Collins and the fact that Jeff Collins was the defensive coordinator and he still helped out with the secondary and the safeties and did individual stuff while Torian kind of met with the corners. And they're going to be doing something similar. So does that make you feel a little bit better, Alex, that they kind of have this camaraderie already and make that Jeff Collins hire continue to look pretty good?
Yeah, I think that was one of the big things that led South Carolina to hiring or Shane Beamer to hiring Jeff Collins, isn't it? He's worked with just about everybody on that defensive staff. Clayton White at Western Carolina, Shane Beamer at Georgia Tech, they worked together. And then Torian Gray as well. He mentioned that. So I think everybody is familiar with him. And just from a Jeff Collins kind of standpoint, I think he's going to be in kind of that advanced scouting type of stuff. Working on some game plans and stuff. And I think it's invaluable to have another guy who's been a head coach at a high level before. I don't think you can have enough of those. You already got Mike Furry and those guys, Sean Elliott, who have been head coaches, and I think that just continues to help in any way Shane Beamer. But then also, Jeff Collins was a very successful defensive coordinator at Florida and Mississippi State. So, just having that, as you mentioned, camaraderie with the rest of the staff, I think it's just one that, he'll be invaluable to them to what he can provide just from even a coaching standpoint, especially from a linebacker standpoint, but also in the game planning.
I think it's just a no-brainer. I mean, Torian also talked about DQ Smith. One of his quotes that stuck out to me, Alex, he talked about DQ going to play some more boundary safety now. And that's a position that Nicky Memwari made a lot of plays at. DQ didn't get a lot of attention last year unless he was chasing somebody because, defense is pretty good. He didn't have to do a lot last year that stood out on camera. Mm-hmm. But do you think that's going to put DQ in a position to make more plays and maybe I don't think the quote takes away at all from Nicky Memwari, but what does that tell you about that particular position and the style of play there? Maybe more aggressive?
It could be. I think sometimes it's just from a stat standpoint, I think Nicky Memwari was just a playmaker from that standpoint. He went up and made those plays and made those stats. But DQ's been solid in his 3 years at South Carolina. And, that's what's going to be kind of interesting to see what they do there from a, versatility standpoint, that secondary. And we've talked about it a lot here. But, they got so many different options that they can go to in that secondary and the different places and that they can play, put like a Brandon Cisse at corner who can also play nickel. Kilgore, who's mainly been working at nickel, he said today, but can move back to safety. But it's really kind of interesting, and you got to talk to Peyton Williams and David Busey today as well. So it's just a lot of different options there, and DQ's one that he brings that veteran kind of leadership, and I think he and a guy like Nick Barrett on the D tackle have really taken on that leadership role along with those other returners in Collier and Jalen Kilgore.
I agree, and the fact that they I think he had a quote about Peyton Williams, and Peyton has to continue to earn it. He's got to do the things he's supposed to do because he wants to see what David Busey has. He wants to see what Kelvin Hunter has. I mean, there's opportunity, and that's not a slight on any of the three players, but we all know what competition breeds, and that's excellence. I don't want to spend too much time here, Alex. Like we talked about, we've talked about the secondary. We both feel really good about interchangeability, the players, the 2 deep, maybe even the 2.5, 3 deep. Maybe not for every opponent in the SEC, but the couple things here. Jalewis Solomon, I do want to mention this, shows talent when healthy. This is a kid they thought was going to be 3 and done, and that's the first time I've really heard the coaches say like, the health. Got to stay healthy and be shows the talent when healthy. And then Vakari Swain, everyone knows this. Needs to focus on maturity and consistency and techniques, and performers take the next step. We all know Vakari is a bit of a gambler, and a lot of times there's pay off, but you can't just rely on instincts all the time. You got to get your solid fundamentals in place. So Lonnie Teasley on the offensive line, Alex, talked a lot about the transfers, talked a lot about Nolan Hay was a name he brought up. I was not expecting Nolan Hay to come up, but we can talk more about that in a little bit. Just the fact that he has a lot of returning players with starts, a lot of players that have been in this position before. Marky Anderson, I think he's kind of a forgotten guy. He's healthy. He's ultra talented. Let's see where he fits into the offensive line. Thinks there's potential for all SEC players. And Jatavius Shivers, he mentioned. And then some of the younger players like Blake and Shed. So, Alex, just overall thoughts and overall takes on what Lonnie has been able to share with the media and kind of behind closed doors, if you can.
Yeah, and I think you can really just, one, mention all those names that you mentioned there. I think it shows the depth that's in that room this year, and they've been building that these past few cycles. But we've been talking for a while here about who's going to be on that starting offensive line, the starting 5, and we feel good about Boaz at center, Josiah at left tackle, and probably Case and Henry at right tackle. But but also you got just a lot of guys in that kind of from a depth standpoint. I mean, Nolan Hayes, one that I think can be pretty invaluable to them as a potential, as a backup guy at center or a guard spot, just because he's got that experience. And I think, there's just so many different names that they have from a depth standpoint that you can tell they're just, I've said this before too, like they're not going to have what happened 2 years happen again, where the injuries just plagued the offensive line and eventually just kind of plagued the whole team. But I think it's a really deep room at just about every spot, and they got a lot of different options to work through at those 2 guard spots that are really kind of up for grabs, it feels like.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And offensive line, I'm gonna have to see it to believe it. I've said that over and over again, but there is no shortage of bodies, and I know that coaches like to get their 7 to 8 and rock with them, but with that many talented guys in the room, just mix it up mid-game. I don't care. If you're a Gamecock fan, I should say. Mike Furry and wide receivers, Alex. He says Mike Furry is very good with coach talk. He was a head coach. He played in the NFL. He has media polish. What can you take away from what Mike Furry shared outside of the rah-rah, team continuity, get better, reps, all that?
I thought, this was, I think you probably mentioned when we talked to him at Birdies with Beamer and that article I put up. He's one that, I think the biggest thing that I probably took away from that interview was him talking about Donovan Murphy. And, he was asked, is Donovan Murphy kind of behind going into camp just because he was the only one that wasn't here in the spring? And he said, not at all. He's not behind at all. And that's not too surprising just because, how much of a high IQ player Donovan Murphy is. But at the same time, too, with him being in Irma, he could also be around for spring practice and, just really couldn't do the on-field stuff, but was there and can, continue to learn the playbook, watch practice, and he's one that he's going to be right in that mix in the rotation. So, I thought that's, really kind of interesting to hear him talk about, he's just from a physical standpoint where Donovan Murphy is, and it kind of feels like he's been ready to kind of pick up right where those guys left off.
I agree. And having a Nick Harbor in there, having a Mazio Bennett, those are 2 guys that have been around the program. They know what, expected of them. and then you throw in a Jared Brown and a Dre Jacobs. I'm just telling you, those two, they're electric. They're electric if you can make it work. Maybe kind of gadgety.
Yeah,
He did mention Donovan Murphy, like he mentioned, talked about, and then Brian Rowe as freshmen that kind of stood out.
Yeah, I was just going to go back to Drake Jacobs. One, when he was talking about him, just kind of mentioned, he said you think about maturity, and he says he's grown up a lot so far at South Carolina. And I think, when you think about go back and look at Drake Jacobs, like he was kind of plagued by injuries a little bit last year, but you think back to the Old Dominion game, he was, kind of, electric in that game, made some really nice catches and had his moments in other games too. But when you think about that wide receiver, I mean, this offseason we've talked about returners. Like I think he kind of gets overshadowed a little bit, but I mean he's really talented, and he's got coming out of high school you can see the talent. But last year you also saw flashes of it. So I think now it's just continuing to do what you can to stay healthy. But he's one that I'm gonna keep my eye on too, just because I think he can have a pretty solid season as well.
He has Antonio Brown. The NFL became a master route technician, just probably the best route runner that NFL has ever seen. Maybe outside of Jerry Rice, but when you look at Dre Jacobs, it looked like he just played like a Steve Smith senior style of football in Florida. I'm just going to run this way for a little bit. I'm going to run that way for a little bit. I'm faster than you. I can run longer than you, and that works in high school. I mean, Tyreek Hill made it to the NFL and still does it. That's all Tyreek Hill does. It takes end arounds. So with Dre, I think it's just excuse me. At the situation where he's got to get the little parts of the game down. I don't think that they're going to be able to hold a red shirt on all the freshmen. I mean, I think Donovan Murphy, Brian Rowe, and maybe some special teams participation, but I do think that they'd love to have the older guys kind of step up and then let the younger guys learn and be ready next year.
Yeah, I'd throw Malik Clark in there too. As far as potentially, not having a redshirt year,
in the wide receiver rotation is kind of what
right.
You're
saying. Yeah.
Marquell Blackwell. I don't know how many interviews from Marquell Blackwell exist on the Big Spur, but it can't be many. What did Marquell have to say when you guys talked to him?
Yeah, I think everybody kind of want to talk to him about the Faison stuff, and I thought he kind of said some really good things about how Faison has handled all this, and he's kind of just kind of gave some a little bit of the coach speak of he's got to control the controllables and things like that. But he mentioned how awesome he has been in it, and I don't think that's too surprising. Faison I think has remained pretty focused and engaged through all that through this NCAA process, which that's a whole nother topic that we can discuss at some other time because it's still no answer, and it's getting down to crunch time on that. But yeah, I think it's really interesting now. I think they kind of have some confidence in that running back room, one way or the other with Faison. Obviously, a lot of confidence, but still would be confident in the rest of that room just because from, Jaworn Howell and Matthew Fuller, I think getting into that year 2 in the program is going to be big for them. And obviously Jaworn being a year older, having another year in a college program as well. But then you got Oscar Attaway, who's going to be that leader and a guy that can, could also be a starting running back. It has that potential. You saw a little bit of that in the Illinois game. And then with, Isaiah Augusta, I think they also like him too. It's just now, getting him acclimated to the playbook and, just under, Marquell Blackwell and kind of what he expects. But he's one that's really intriguing too. I think that could be, make some sort of impact this year, one way or the other.
I agree with you. And you're kind of tying up the main position groups. Sean Elliott in the tight end room. Alex, I'm going to put this out there into the ether. Outside of quarterback right now, I think I feel best about the tight end position group than any other position group on the team. I think they have dudes in that room.
Yeah, I said this on a show earlier. If I was choosing a breakout candidate for the offense, I think it'd be Michael Smith. I think he's got that potential for that this year. He's one that he played a lot last year. He kind of in that two tight end set with Josh Simon, but he's one that had his flashes, and he did miss his spring, but I don't think that's going to hurt him too much just because of how much he played last year. But he's got, just all the talent in the world. 6'6", but moves like he's almost like a wide receiver and plays like a wide receiver with how he his hands and his footwork and all that. So a guy that I think is going to be featured pretty prominently in this offense, and I can see him being obviously from a route standpoint, but then from a check down standpoint, I think he can be a problem there. Get you 4 or 5 yards on the check down, or get you a first down on the check down.
Yeah, and Brady Hunt's a guy that can do that as well. He seems to always fall forward. One of the interesting quotes that I think is relevant here is Sean Elliott talked about how Michael Smith didn't have any strength last year. He was weak, and he did everything on pure skill and God-given athleticism. And now he's actually filled out. He's gotten stronger. He's gotten bigger, faster, quicker. He looks like a different guy from his high school to year 2 in a college program.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you expect to see from a year 1 to year 2 guy to take those gains in the weight room. And just from a blocking standpoint, I think it was Jordan Dingle talking yesterday, like talking about from a blocking standpoint, working on the Sean Elliott, you're going to be able to block. You're going to have to block the play too. And also we talk about Jordan Dingle. I think he's got a chance to, and Brady Hunt, but another guy to potentially keep an eye on is Maurice Brown in that room. Like, he's one that just from a physical standpoint, and even Sean Elliott mentioned it in the spring, like his explosiveness. Like, I think he made a few plays in some spring scrimmages for him, and he's been a guy that's been really good on special teams for him. But he's another one that the more I talk about it here from Maurice Brown and others, I'm starting to agree with you just from where you feel about that tight end room. Just because I think when you trust Sean Elliott and what he's been able to do, he knows how to coach tight ends. But they also have a lot of talent in their room and a lot of guys who maybe even haven't yet reached their potential who could take it to the next level.
Yeah, I reading through all of those reports over the last couple of weeks and just kind of piecing together the puzzle. That because you got to take their word for what it is. Like, they're not going to lie to you because it's going to come back on them and publish word. But man, I got really excited for that tight end room. Really excited for it. Special teams. Alex, we're not going to talk much about special teams right now. They're going to do the same thing for the next month. They're going to practice. We'll figure out who the punt returner is, the kick returner, kicker, punter, all that in due time, because they're going to have a full-blown competition.
Yeah, maybe next week on the show we'll have maybe a little bit more answer just coming out of that first scrimmage. That's when they'll really start to put those guys. Obviously, they're putting those guys in pressure situations in every scrimmage, or every practice. But that scrimmage is really what I'm interested to hear how, from a special team standpoint, from a kicking, punting, and even a return game standpoint as well.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I do want to. We're going to have to hit a break here. We're not going to get to one little piece of just fun article from the Big Spur because we got to move on. We got other stuff to talk about, but. Make sure you go to thebigspur.com. I don't know if this is an Alex or a Hale article, but it talks about what the players are on the team are saying about the freshmen. So the upperclassmen talking about the freshmen. Really cool. One of my favorite articles of the year. So go to the Big Spur and check that out. And before we hit our sponsor break, I do want to point out, I was not aware of this. I was aware of it. I didn't have the number in front of me. But Alex, trivia time.
Okay.
How many shows are on the Chief Sports Network right now?
Oh, so is the morning show and afternoon show count as one? Or
everything with the Chief Sports Network? How many shows are part of the network right now?
10.
Good job, 10. 10 is the answer.
Exactly. I promise I didn't know that. That was a complete guess.
Yeah, so 10 shows. So everyone, make sure you're checking out the Chief Sports Network. Make sure you get on the app. You can find all the shows there. One of the cool things is, like, you have Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 p.m. covered. And then you have Friday. You have another show. You have our show. Like, Tailgate Talks, by the way, with Marcus Lattimore is awesome. SEC Sunday Night, JC and Morgan. This is a pretty fun place to be right now, Alex.
Rooster Rant coming up back again this season.
Yep. Rooster Rant. And obviously, we want to say hello to everybody. Craig, Brandon, WJM, Stalk Queen up there, Lance, Cynical. Appreciate all y'all being here. Make sure I get to everybody. Thanks. Oh, Frederick. Yeah. Good morning. Good evening. You got the joke off the top. But Alex, we have a brand new sponsor, and I cannot wait to roll that footage.
JC Sherbert here had a brilliant idea that some good friends of mine in Florence have told me about. Next time you're having a wedding or an event, or anytime you got to feed a bunch of people, talk to my friends over at Flavortown Eats and Events. That's right. It's a food truck / trailer. Prepares the food fresh on site right there for you. No hassle. It's absolutely delicious. They'll come out, turnkey solution to feed the masses at your event. Go to their website right now. flavortownflow.com. That's flavortownflow.com. They have all the contact information you need, and they are a proud sponsor of the Late Night Gamecock Show and the Chief Sports Network.
So I'm sorry, there's no more D's Wings, but let me tell you, Kirby Anderson, owner and operator Flowtown Eats, Flavortown, what you just saw. My gosh, the best wings you'll ever put in your mouth. He could charge $5 a wing, but he doesn't. He gives you a good deal. But Kirby is great. He's been around the Florence PD area for 30 years. He would give you the shirt off his back, and he would love to make your event fantastic. But make sure you call ahead. Go back, call ahead, or go online because they fill up fast. They really, really do. But Alex, moving on really quickly, we got to talk about Texas A&M and Clemson. So, what are your thoughts on these games? I'll prime you up here, Alex. Texas A&M Gamecocks are going to travel to College Station November 15th, former home of Gamecock defensive tackle Gabriel Download Dindy. Maybe he has some secrets there. The game we already know is going to be played between noon and 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So go ahead and prepare for that. Alex, is that good or bad for the Gamecocks? Let's see. Gamecocks will be coming off a bye week before they play A&M. And they would have played Ole Miss on November 1st. And the Aggies will be coming off a road trip to Missouri on November 8th. What are your thoughts there? Is that an early window good for the Gamecocks?
Sure. I think it could be. I think it kind of gets to the point where I think you always want, anytime you go on the road, you'd rather have a day game. But it's just Texas A&M team's one that's really interesting. I think is going to be one that there's a few teams in the SEC that I want to see play early on, but they're one that I'm definitely interested to see early on in some of their early matchups because I think when you look at him like Marcel Reed, I think he's one that you look at these SEC quarterback rankings. He's a little bit lower than I would rank him personally, just because I remember him watching him play South Carolina. Like he was pretty good in that game. Like he had his freshman moments in that game with that pick to O'Donnell Fortune and things like that. But he made some really good plays in that game too. And he can kind of do it with his arm and legs. So I think he's got a chance to be pretty good this year and one I'm interested to watch early on.
Yeah, let's see what Phil Steele has to say about it. Real quick, the Gamecocks are the Aggies are 3-2 versus the Gamecocks for the past 5 seasons. So pretty even matchup with the Aggies having the 1-game advantage. Last season, the Gamecocks won 44-20 in Williams-Brice Stadium. Phil Steele has Mike Elko as the 9th best coach in the SEC, and Texas A&M has Phil Steele's 6th best experience chart rating coming into the season. On offense, Phil Steele says they have the 7th best quarterback situation, tied for the best running back situation, the 9th best pass catchers, and the best offensive line. No first team all SEC. He does have running back Le'Veon Moss and offensive guard Chase Basantis on the 2nd team, and then offensive guard Amarej Reed-Adams, and 4th team wide receiver, a name that Gamecock fans probably remember, Casey Concepcion as a 4th teamer on offense. So, Alex, did anything shock you there when we talked about Phil Steele's ratings of A&M's offense?
No, from a pass catcher standpoint, I'm not surprised. I think they were 9th, is what you said. It's not too surprising just because Noah Thomas was pretty good. He transferred to Georgia, and then Jabri Barber, Ja'Day Walker, and Cyrus Allen are also gone. But I think Casey Concepcion, he's one that he was awesome at NC State, like really, really good. And I think he's one he can end up being one of the better transfer portal gets from a wide receiver standpoint. But I could see this offense being, especially under Mike Elko, and that kind of system. Like I see them being like this run heavy first offense just because of the running backs they do have coming back, and Le'Veon and Reuben Owens and Amari Daniels. Like those guys have been there for a few years and are just really good running backs. And when you have guys like that, like those guys can rotate in and out. And so I think, and then you add in Marcel Reed's legs to that too. So they're really kind of an interesting offense that, I think, if they can get the run game going, it's going to help their pass game.
Yeah. You got Marcel Reed. He's unquestioned quarterback 1. For his career, he's only thrown 276 career passes. So not a large number there, but 60% completion percentage, 8.1 yards per attempt, 16 TDs versus 7 interceptions. And then another 500, almost 600 rushing yards with 8 touchdowns on the ground, Alex. So he is the straw that stirs that drink, even more so than most quarterbacks are for their team. So Marcel Reed, I think, is the big X factor for me. We saw him play fantastic against LSU, and then we saw him play okay against South Carolina, and then up and down the rest of the season. They did get 2 transfer wide receivers. Casey Concepcion, we already talked about, and then Mario Craver from Mississippi State. Are those guys proven yet, Alex? That's my question.
I think Casey Conception is. I think he's one that he's definitely proven. Yeah, NC. So I remember watching him. I think it was their first game of the season. I can't remember who it was against, but he was electric and really good at NC State last year. So I think he, like I said, I think he could end up being one of the better wide receiver transfer portal gets for not only the Texas A&M but in the SEC this season.
Yeah, and they have 8 defensive starters back. One of the craziest stats that I came across in Phil Steele's magazine this year was Mike Elko, his last year at Duke. He gave up 15.9 points per game. And then the next 2 years at Duke, when he left for A&M, it was 23 points per game and 22 points per game. I don't know if he's Mike Elko's actually worth seven less points a game, but that's a pretty crazy stat. So, Alex, we know the defense is going to be salty. We think the offense has electric potential. I would probably say, if I'm giving a preseason odds on this, I'd say Texas A&M minus 7.5. What about you?
Yeah, I don't think I was going to go that high. I was more in the 2.5 to 4 range. I'll kind of split the difference. So I'll go 3.5. Again, it's so hard to make a line for this game right now, just because you can make a case for this line to be way closer to South Carolina's way too. But I'll go 2 or 3.5.
I would probably take the Gamecocks plus 7.5. I might take A&M minus 3.5 right now, but we'll see. A lot of football left to be played. Just it's a tough atmosphere, and the Gamecocks have not won there very much. Alex, we got to talk Clemson. That's the last game we're going to talk about this preseason before we talk about games each week. That game's going to be 12 noon. 12 noon kickoff in Williams-Brice Stadium on November 29th. Is it good or bad for the Gamecocks? Gamecocks be coming off a home game against Coastal Carolina. Clemson's coming off a home game against Furman. So both teams should be well rested if they can, hopefully as healthy as possible. And last game of the year, can't hold anything back. So Alex, for laughs, let's predict Clemson's schedule outside of the South Carolina game.
Okay.
Game 1, they host LSU.
Win.
All right, 1-0. Troy 2-0 at Georgia Tech.
3-0.
All right, Syracuse at home.
4-0.
Okay, bye week at North Carolina.
Ooh, that's where it could get interesting. I think there's going to be a game somewhere in here in the schedule that I'll go North Carolina gets that one.
Okay, so 4-1.
Yeah.
Then you have at Boston College.
5.
All right, SMU at home.
6.
6-1 bye. Duke at home.
7.
Florida State at home.
I'll go 8.
At Louisville.
I'll go 8-2. I think Louisville may get them.
All right, and then Furman.
Win. So
yeah. All right, so you have 9-2. I have 9-2 as well, and I have their 2 losses outside of the South Carolina game. We'll talk about later in the season or before the season, but not this episode. I have them at 9-2 with 2 of those losses coming from the of LSU, North Carolina, and SMU. I think they dropped 2 of those 3 games. So 9-2. I think they flirt with losses against Florida State and at Louisville. Louisville, that's a Friday night game.
Yeah, and that one, and I was going to say, that Georgia Tech game early on can be pretty scary for them. It's in Atlanta, right? I think.
I don't know, but
I think. Okay, well, either way, Georgia Tech has been one that they can sneak up on people. So
yeah, Georgia Tech is in Atlanta. I just don't know where they play in Atlanta.
No, I mean it's the game in Atlanta.
Oh, let me look at it again. Sorry. Yeah, the game is at Georgia Tech. That's coming off LSU and Troy. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that one could be one that could be sneaky too.
All right, so the Gamecocks are 2-2 against Clemson in the last 5 seasons. The rivals didn't play in the COVID season. Gamecocks won 17-14 last season. Over the last 3 seasons, Gamecocks are 2-1. The game's been close: 31-30, 16-7, 17-14. So, what does Phil say about the Clemson Tigers? He has Dabo Sweeney as the best coach in the ACC, and they are second on Phil Steele's experience chart nationally. And kind of off topic, Alex, I don't criticize fellow media folks often, but I looked at where they had Bill Belichick ranked in the ACC coaching rankings. They had Dabo number 1, Mike Norvell number 2, Rhett Lashley and Bill Belichick tied for number 3 or 4. I can't rationalize that.
Yeah. I was sitting here and saying a minute ago that North Carolina could beat Clemson, but they also I mentioned to see just because they're going to have a whole new roster for Belichick, but also I think their schedule, I was looking at it a few days ago, it looks pretty manageable for them to, get some momentum early on. So, it's going to be interesting just to see how that whole thing works up in Chapel Hill.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be crazy. I don't know if it's even worth it to go through Clemson's all ACC selections according to Phil Steele, but just for giggles.
Mm-hmm.
Best quarterback in the ACC, 4th best running back room, best receivers, best offensive line, best defensive line, best linebackers, best defensive backs, and special teams 8th. I don't know how your special teams can be 8th when you have on special teams a long snapper, a punter, a kicker, and a punt returner. But you're the 8th best in the ACC. Maybe that's a typo.
Yeah.
But we're not going to break down Clemson too deep, Alex. I think the biggest question marks are, can Lincoln Riley, who thus far is, or Garrett Riley, who thus far is not his brother, Lincoln Riley, can him and Matt Luke figure out how to score points when it matters for Clemson, not just against, some teams they should be blowing out, but then teams that they should be blowing out that they're not and have to play catch up.
Yeah, offensively, the one question I have for Clemson is running back. Obviously, they're having to replace Phil Moffitt, who is really good, but they got Jay Haynes back, but it's just, I think it's a lot of inexperience. Also, they got Gideon, the one that's the freshman that's coming in. I think it's just an inexperienced room, so we'll see kind of what CJ Spiller and those guys have for running backs over there. But defense, it seems like these past few years under Dabo Sweeney, they're going to be loaded again. I mean, they always have guys up front. They're going to have that again with TJ Parker and those guys and Peter Woods. And, I think it's just, that's going to be key, to watch throughout the season. And once that matchup against South Carolina comes, but, they also got some guys returning in the secondary as well. So, I think the defense is going to be, interesting to watch just because I think they got a chance, that unit's probably going to be pretty good in the ACC. And then that offense, it's just, can Cade Klubnik keep up, and take that next step in his game because he's got some talented receivers to those two as well.
Yeah, and here's the question for me when it comes to defense. Yeah, they got Tom Allen, former Indiana head coach and Penn State defensive coordinator. He's got the receipts. He's a good defensive coordinator. We'll say what we want about head coach. I don't critique Indiana except for their schedule, but anyway. Last year, they gave up 23.4 points per game on defense, and they gave up 161 yards rushing per game.
Yeah.
So when I look at this, Alex, it's the same defense is back. It's still the best defensive line, the best linebackers, the best secondary. Is it the players or is it the coach? That's the question. They're going to find out this year.
That's what's going to be interesting to watch if it's, a system thing, when Tom Allen brings in, does that kind of help from a running standpoint? Because that just, you'd think that number would be a whole lot lower just based on the talent they have on all 3 levels of that defense. But that was something that I think kind of, hurt that defense last year was the run stopping.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question for me. If Clemson starts to become a run stopper instead of a run funnel, then yeah, their preseason rankings, I mean, defense wins championships. And they'll have a position to be in every game they play this year. But looking at Clemson's last few regular seasons, Alex, so last year, just regular seasons, we're not talking about ACC championship game or college football playoffs or bowl games. 2024, 9-3. 2023, 8-4. 2022, 10-2. 2021, 9-3. So that's averaging a 9-3 season over the last 4 years. And this isn't a Clemson show, but wouldn't you rather Clemson be 9-3 each year instead of 11, 12-0, 11-1, 12-0? So, I've been thinking this for a while. I don't think that Clemson is that far ahead of an average SEC team. So, is it a benefit that South Carolina plays in the SEC and plays rugged, tough games and is hardened for battle, whatever you want to say, at the end of the season? Or is it more beneficial for Clemson because they get to be really, really healthy? I don't know. Your take.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting to think about, and kind of think about this matchup. Going into this year, like it can end up being one of the biggest Carolina Clemson matchups in a long time. Like obviously last year, I think everybody thought it was going to be playoff implications were on the line, but it turned out it wasn't. But you think back to those when those 11-win seasons, like it was huge matchups. Top 15, top 10 matchups between Carolina and Clemson, and both seasons go the way we think they could go for both teams. Like it could be a huge matchup with a lot of eyes on it. With when you look at the draft, boards and all that, two of the better quarterbacks in the country.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I want to see where Clemson is because they haven't been that far ahead of the ACC. Even last year, they had to have a field goal at the end. And I'm not trying to poo-poo Clemson. I'm just saying that they're becoming much more of a team that South Carolina should expect to play with every year, contend with every year, and beat every year because they're getting closer and closer to that. And there's no Deshaun Watson or Trevor Lawrence walking through that door over in Clemson. So, Alex, my preseason point spread on the Gamecock-Clemson game is Gamecocks minus 4.5.
I was going to go 4, but I'll go 4.5 too.
Okay, I think it would be there because that's assuming the Gamecocks have the year that we think they will. Clemson having their year and Gamecocks being at home. So, Alex, I want to close out the show. I've heard so much talk about, these schedules and SEC plays their non-conference games against nobodies. So I just want to quickly throw a schedule at you, Alex.
Okay.
So this football team schedule is Nevada, FIU, Villanova, bye week, Oregon, at UCLA, Northwestern, at Iowa, at Ohio State, Indiana, at Michigan State, Nebraska, and at Rutgers. Now, you can do process of elimination. It's a team that's in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
But just guess whose schedule that is.
I'm trying to think of now who is it? Illinois?
What's that? No, it's Penn
Illinois?
State. Penn State.
Okay.
So, but I have Illinois' schedule here if you want me to. I'm just going to go through real quick. That's all it is, just real quick. So, Illinois' schedule. Western Illinois, at Duke, Western Michigan, at Indiana, Southern Cal, at Purdue, Ohio State, bye week, at Washington, Rutgers, bye week, Maryland, at Wisconsin, Northwestern. Every single SEC team would trade schedules right now with that team. Same with Penn State.
Yeah, I think just from an Illinois perspective, like you see where they're being ranked right now in the top 15 or so, some of these polls, like they got a chance to, kind of build on what they did last year and just based on, that schedule. But, I think, when you think about those schedules, like, Ohio State and Penn State are going to be the two toughest teams in Oregon, throw them in there. That's going to be the three, top teams in the Big Ten. And, if you can, these teams can do whatever they can to avoid, two of them or maybe one of them. I think that's a, win for those teams.
Yeah, it's just the difference in playing 6 hard games a year minimum to playing 3 or 2 or 1. And while we're talking about it, Alex, I'm not going to spend that much time on it, but if you're Boise State or UConn, yes, I'm sorry, you do have to win every game on your schedule. If Clemson wasn't in the ACC, I'd say Clemson has to win every game on their schedule to make it to the college football playoffs over Big Ten for sure, but 1,000% SEC team. So I don't know. I just got mad about it because I'm like, if you say something like that in public and you're on the record, then one SEC team a year, whoever finished last the year before, should be able to call you and say, we're trading schedules right now. And then you can actually see what the SEC is like. And you have to take it. You have to trade schedules with Vandy.
Well, I think that's kind of what, coaches want to kind of figure out. It's just from a playoff perspective, how much is strength of schedule actually, graded or whatever? How is it used? Just because I think it seems like it kind of changes every year, to be honest.
Yeah. I just, if anybody wants to trade schedules with any SEC team, I guarantee the SEC team will accept it. Even Miami. Oh, we have to play Florida. Oh, they were already on our schedule. That was your big one, So, yeah, it just kind of made me mad. But, Alex, I did want to get here really quick. Somebody had a question for you. Brandon did. Alex, which freshman receiver do you think will have the biggest year? Before you answer, Alex, we are going to have our preview, our, what we call it, predictions, our prediction episode. Yeah. And that might be one that Alex wants to talk about. But just to let you know, Brandon, we're going to have 1 million of these type of hypotheticals over the next week or two. And so we'll make sure we hit all of them. But, Alex, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah. Brian Rowe.
The answer is Donovan Murph. But
so like the three I had in the category would have been Rowe, Murph, and Clark. And I think they'll all be pretty close, to be honest with you. But I'll go Rowe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I did see someone here ask me where my seats were in Atlanta. I don't even know yet. I believe they were emailed out to somebody recently, but I'm very much a go with the flow and figure it out when someone tells me. And that's why I can't pronounce people's last names. No one's taken the time to teach me how to say them or their first names. But
I feel like you won't have a bad seat in that stadium.
No. I will say, though, I'm a big proponent of cash because, all these restaurants, they start doing that credit card fee. Mm-hmm. I had a 4% credit card fee the other day on a lunch with some friends. But you can't carry it. It's a cashless facility. So Alex is going to have all the food paid for him. Well, we're going to have to make sure we have a credit card or something like that when you go in our Apple Pay. So, make sure you do that. Alex, really anything that we failed to hit on? I'm really excited that the preseason previews are over. I like doing research once I actually have data, not what people tell me might happen.
Yeah, I think we've kind of hit on everything so far. Obviously, Media Day was last week. Kind of touched on a lot of that. All these, we're starting to get some player press conferences and things like that. But first scrimmage on Saturday for South Carolina, they'll be over at the stadium. I think it's at 6:30 or 6. It's like a specific time. I think it'd be like 6:33 or something like that. But really interested to hear what comes out of that, just because the first scrimmage is really when you start to hear, like, especially because there'll be full pads, you'll start to get some stuff about the offense and defense and things like that. So really kind of intrigued to see what the word is coming out of that. And then heading into that second scrimmage we'll talk about next week.
Yeah, and at some point you got to start divvying up reps. And that first scrimmage is the free-for-all. Everyone earn your spot, overtake somebody, but then second, third, preseason, it's over. Yep. You don't get that many scrimmages. So I'm sure there'll be some fallout. I would just remind everybody, if the defensive line had 18 sacks in the game, it doesn't mean the defensive line is going to be the best in the country. It might, but it also doesn't mean the offensive line is the worst that's ever played. It's weird, especially with sacks. Sometimes they just blow the whistle randomly. So, don't freak out on the offensive line if you hear about the defensive line having a good day and all that. But we'll be around. You will have the Big Spur. We'll be covering this stuff, and we'll be having the fallout. We'll tell you everything next week that we hear. And Alex, with that, appreciate you tonight, buddy. Thank you.
Another good episode. See everybody again next week.
Yeah, and to everyone that's watched and listened, thank you so much for being with us here tonight. When you hang out with us, you give us your time. It's the most valuable thing you have. We really, really do appreciate it. If you ever need anything, just please reach out to us, and we will talk to you all next Wednesday at 8 p.m. See you then.